So anyway, I have kind of an informal presentation about a little tiny vignette, a little tiny piece of my work. And I'm going to encourage you to stop me at any point with questions, because I want this to be a conversation. I gave the formal paper where I stand up here and I read with a very serious face yesterday, and so this is not that. This is supposed to be a conversation. And it's stuff that I'm still thinking about and stuff that I'm still conceptualizing. A piece of this, a small piece of the pirate story, is going to be coming out, I think, momentarily in Boyhood Studies. And I talked about this with our class just a minute ago. It's a journal that used to be called Thymos, but they wisely changed the name, right? Because thymos sounds like some sort of strange organ, doesn't it? Like it might be part of your brain or your intestines. But now it's called Boyhood Studies. And so this will be a piece that comes out in Boyhood Studies. And myself and my colleague Christine Malazzi collaborated on the piece. And it's called There Are No Girl Pirate Captains. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So today's presentation, and again, just shoot those hands up with questions or comments at any point, because this is a conversation, is about pirate captains and how I attempted to use pictures and words to destabilize what I call patriarchal constellations in preschool. And I thought I could think a little bit about what I was doing as mini YPAR. And I don't really do YPAR. Does anybody know what I mean when I say YPAR?
Could you? No, I was going to
Fantastic. It's kind of, I love alphabet soup because you can sound super smart just throwing things together and people don't want to ask. YPAR means Youth Participatory Action Research. Okay, so it's a specific kind of action research, which I do not do. I don't do action research very much. It's just not the kind of question that I ask, but it has to do with youth in particular. And one of my colleagues at the University of Massachusetts, Jason Irizarry, that's spelled just like it sounds, does a lot of really fantastic work with YPAR, and he is just a love and a guiding star in so many ways. And he was talking about it so much, I thought, you know, maybe that's what I was doing with the pirates. And so that's why I have a question mark, because I'm not sure that's really what I'm doing, and maybe y'all can help me as I ask these questions as we continue to talk today. So, all right, so the question here is, what should an ethnographer of childhood, myself, do when children and teachers are confronted with sexist media influences in children's play? Okay, that's a big question. And anybody who's heard me yammer on, and there are so many people in this room, anybody who's heard me yammer on about my work, either at my paper or I was just visiting a class, knows that I have kind of the principle guiding a lot of what I do is that I don't interfere. I'm not like a lump sitting in a corner not interacting with people, but I'm not correcting children. If kid bludgeons another kid in preschool while I'm sitting there, I don't report them, I don't stop them. I'm there to watch. It's a very kind of interpretive position. But there's kind of an interesting moment about what I should do when I was confronted. I'm going to share this vignette with you in a minute about what we see when we see sexist media influences in children's play. So just to kind of give you an idea of what I've been doing, I've been doing an ethnography in preschool that in a socioeconomically and racial ethnically diverse rural New England community preschool. It's a project-based and play-based curriculum, meaning they don't really have a set curriculum that they follow in a scripted, rigid sense. Rather, it's project-based, it's play-based. So the children have interest, they explore those interests in play, the teachers bring in enrichment materials, and they follow along in that particular direction. There's 2 European white female teachers who have a combined 40 years of experience teaching preschool. The ethnography is ongoing. I'm thinking I'm going to close down the site after this year of data collection, but I'm still there. I only use handwritten notes. I kind of subscribe to the interpretive tradition of ethnography, which means I'm not doing action research. So this is a little bit of a departure, this vignette I'm going to share today. And I'm very curious about how that fits in with what I'm doing. The data from today are from the second year of the study. So it's 2013-14. There are 14 kids in the class. 3 identify as Latino, 2 African American, 2 Asian American, 7 European and white, 2 of whom identify as Jewish, Ashkenazi Jewish ethnicity. 8 of the 14 get free and reduced lunch and also subsidized preschool tuition. So you see some of the socioeconomic diversity with this group. 1 child has significant special cognitive needs. 8 identify as female, 6 identify as male. I hope that adds up properly. It just occurred to me there might be a math error. But that's what's going on. And I spent years and years and years and years and years in this site doing observational work. And something that came up while I was in this site was the pirate game. I talked about the sleeping family game and the gymnastics game in my lecture yesterday, but today I'm going to talk a little bit about the pirate game. And largely it's because the kids were watching a show called Jake and the Neverland Pirates. Who is familiar with this television program? okay? Jake and the Neverland Pirates is a Disney spin-off program about pirates, and the kids all watch it, and then they come to school, as children do, and act out the pirate game, okay? And I was really interested in the pirate game because it kept showing up over and over again in play, and it wasn't the kind of thing where I saw it as a jumping off point, where kids say, oh, let's play pirates, and then it turns into something else. They stuck to the script of the television program pretty closely. So I explored a little bit in kind of a literature review, looking at how maleness and masculinity in television media influences kids. And one of the most interesting studies I came across was from Myers. And she says that media images of men and maleness drive the dominance of a hegemonic ideal of male supremacy, even among very, very young boys. And something that's really interesting is that there's a whole status game happening in Jake and the Neverland Pirates. There's Jake, who's the head pirate, and there's Cubby, who's this secondary male character, and he's sort of a non-hegemonic male. But in Myers' research, she says that even having a presence of a non-hegemonic male in the game further shores up the idea of hegemonic masculinity as desirable. So their attempts at making it a little bit better kind of fall on deaf ears. We know that children's television with female protagonists is marketed as girls' television, and it's explicitly not for boys, whereas television with a male protagonist is explicitly for boys, right? We also know, and that's from Orenstein, but some of the other research that I've read recently about some of the things about race and ethnicity in children's childhood stories and narratives and books and television is that when you have a white protagonist, that is a television program that's considered for everybody. If you have a protagonist of color, that's considered sort of a specific market, right? So we think about programs like Little Bill. Anybody seen Little Bill? Okay, Bill Cosby's program. Little Bill had one of the only television programs with an African-American male protagonist for children in the age bracket of 2 to 6. It was really interesting, okay? And it became a boutique program, meaning that it was marketed as it's something just for a particular demographic, okay? Same thing with Diego, which is another program. He's Dora's sibling, I think, and then Handy Manny, which is problematic in a lot of ways. But again, these are protagonists of color, and they are marketed as in the same way that girls' shows are just for girls, right? So you still have the dominance of a white male protagonist in most children's television, and that's what I see showing up in preschool. Rubel and Tavis Lamonda do a lot of fantastic work with young children and television, and they found that among children who are age 4, so these are your sort of middling preschoolers, my preschoolers were 3 to 5, so around the 4s, television watching was positively correlated with a belief that boys are better than girls and maleness is of higher status than femaleness. Okay, so that's hundreds and hundreds of kids. So they're finding that television is not this innocuous thing, and I felt like I needed to have some of this background before I got into talking about Jake and the Neverland Pirates and the pirate incident that I will read to you in a minute. Okay, so just for those of you who aren't familiar, here's Jake and the Neverland Pirates. This is a screenshot from Disney used with permission. Here's Jake in the middle, and there's Cubby, who is sort of the B squad male. He's small, he's feminine, he's round, right? Jake is strapping and meant to be attractive. And then we have Izzy, who is female, and she's racially ambiguous, I think. And these are the pirates. And then there's an anthropomorphized kind of parrot character that also shows up. Their children, notably the adults, are the villains in this. And that's what they happen. So I want to share with you, and I'm going to read this because I want to share the vignette as it happened about the pirate game. So these are the kids that were involved. There's Rory, Isaac, and Dante. And then Lizzie and Rosie are the aspiring pirate captains. And I'll show you. So this is the pirate game. So the pirate game was popular among the core group of 4 boys. It was fluid and imaginative and involved boys who both planned and enacted the play sessions. Rory and Isaac were the most dominant boys. We attributed this to their advanced verbal skills, size, age, agility, and ability to invent interesting games and keep them going, as well as Rory's ownership of the pirate game. He was the person with the most unfettered access to media and the most familiarity with the desirability of the Jake and the Neverland Pirates storyline, though other boys did occasionally elaborate and create departures. Isaac's academic middle-class parents did not allow him access to television at that time, nor did he have access to attractive print media or merchandise from programs like Jake. Jason was a bit younger and had a slight speech delay. Dante had relocated to New Elizabethtown, which is where the study took place, mid-year, and was younger than Isaac and Rory. It's important to note that Dante, with his friendly, kind personality and progressive, overtly feminist parents, was much less likely to exclude females from play than were the other boys. As he grew more comfortable in the class, he would frequently champion girls who wanted to enter all-boy play spaces and find creative ways for them to fit into games. And yes, I have a paper I'm writing about Dante. On one occasion, in early spring 2013, two girls attempted to enter into the pirate game when a dominant player, Rory, who was alone because his two usual playmates, Jason and Isaac, were working on assessments with the teacher and Dante was absent. Rory found himself on his own and needing playmates for the pirate game, so he was willing to allow girls to participate, but only within circumscribed roles. "Let's play Jake and the Neverland Pirates," he said to Lizzie and Rosie. "You can be my crew." The girls were eager to enter play. He proceeded to tell them the plan for the game that day. This was something Rory frequently did with his male playmates as well, though Isaac, Jason, and Dante usually contributed to the plan and the storyline, and disagreements were negotiated and solutions found within the initial planning period before they actively entered the pretend session. When Rory began to lay out the plan for the game, including Lizzie's and Rosie's role assignments, the girls quickly chimed in with ideas for costumes, roles, and the plot, including an array of non-canonical roles borrowed from games with which they were familiar, such as a mother, a kitty cat, and a baby kitten. The girls also wanted to be pirate captains along with Rory. Rory was less willing to hear outside contributions when he was playing with other males, and conflict ensued. As the dispute continued, it drew a teacher's attention. The teachers in this classroom were very reluctant to get involved with disputes unless the children really, really needed help. They really wanted them to resolve them themselves. The teachers were also decidedly non-interventionist in terms of mediating play. They wanted the kids to sort it out. As the following vignette illustrates, Rory reacted negatively to Lizzie and Rose's attempt to take up roles that deviated from the script. Remember, this was a game. They played it to the script. It was not a jumping off point. And when the teacher happened upon this conflict, the teacher's name is Patty, Rory was similarly unwilling to negotiate. The teacher did not mandate inclusion, but rather spent a great deal of time exploring his and others' feelings in an attempt to convince Rory that he should allow girls to participate on their own terms, and this did not have good results. So here's the story. There are no girl pirate captains. So it is mid-morning on an early spring day in preschool. Free play has been going on for some time, and the children are engaged in block area, art table, and imaginative play area. There is a commotion in dramatic play. Rory is speaking very loudly to Lizzie and Rosie. Rory stands opposite the two girls with his hands on his hips. He is decked out in complete pirate kit, cowboy hat, leather vest, beads, and binoculars. This is what a pirate wears, by the way. Rory says sternly, "Girls cannot be pirate captains, only boys can." Patty, one of the preschool teachers, has been listening to the ongoing conversation from a nearby table. Overhearing this particular turn, she approaches, pulling a chair to the group and says, "What's going on, Rory?" Rory is aware that he has been caught doing something he is not supposed to do. He dissembles. "There's only one pirate captain in the game." Patty responds gently, "I heard you say something different. I heard you say that only boys can be pirate captains." Rory becomes agitated and exhaling sharply fesses up. "That's because Rosie wants to be a pirate captain and she can't be one. It is because she is a girl and there is only girl crew. There is only one captain and he drives the ships. Girls can't drive because that's why I have a crew." Okay? Izzy is crew. Right. Patty is calm, choosing to focus on turn-taking rather than the issue of exclusion. She says, "Why can't someone else be captain? Why can't we take turns?" Rory crossed his arms in front of his small body and takes a deep breath. "Because I am the only boy and I do not want to take turns." Patty checks in with Rosie. "Rosie, is it okay with you to be on the crew and not a captain?" Rosie nods that this is just fine. Lizzie disagrees. Lizzie says, "This is not fine with me." Rosie registers what Lizzie has said with an upward glance. She mumbles something very quietly. Rory can't hear what she's saying, so he gets down low and puts his ear next to her face, and we all listen. Rosie speaks a little louder. "I want to be captain." Rory stomps his foot and shakes his hands in the air. "I am the only captain. There is only one captain. I like being the captain every week, and I don't want to take turns." Patty steps in. "Rory, do you remember when Isaac was telling you what jobs you could do? Do you remember how it felt? Do you think Rosie is feeling that way right now?" Rory is not taking the bait. "I have the best map," he continues, "so I am the captain." Patty tries again. "Rory, would you let Lizzie be the captain?" Rory says, "Lizzie does not want to be captain." Lizzie, who along with Rosie has been standing relatively quietly throughout this entire exchange, suddenly says, "Yes, I do." Rory gives her a nasty look. He is not happy. There is only one pirate captain. If Lizzie wants to be the pirate captain, I will be mad. Patty seizes this opportunity to return to a discussion of feelings. How will Lizzie and Rosie feel if they can't be pirate captains? Rory pauses. They will be sad. He pauses again and looks at the floor. He appears to be thinking the problem over. Rory is a popular playmate in preschool, and he obviously does not want his friends and the potential crew to be sad, but he may not want them to be equal either. He offers them a chance to be crew captains, a kind of elevated crew member, and a role he has just invented. Okay, I was offered deputy department head. Sound familiar? Okay. But they still cannot be the pirate captain, the head honcho, the boss. He says, maybe if Rosie and Lizzie want to be crew captains, they can, but if they want to be pirate captains, there is only one pirate captain in the game, so they can't be that, because only boys are pirate captains. Only boys can drive the ship. Patty asked, where did this idea come from? Rory is forthcoming with the evidence. I have a book all about pirates, he says. There are no girl pirates in my book. Boys are pirates. Girls are not pirates. Lizzie steps up. I saw a girl pirate. Patty asks Lizzie, do you have a book with girl pirates? Lizzie nods enthusiastically. Rory can see which way the wind is blowing. He stomps his foot on the ground and shouts, I am not interested in that book. If they both want to be pirate captains, I will get really mad and I will play a different game. I just want to be a pirate captain by myself because girls cannot be pirate captains. Patty continues to gently probe for an inclusive solution to the dilemma. She asks, Rory, I'm having a very hard time working together to come up with a solution where everyone is happy. Are you? Rory is angry. If they play a different game and they do not try to be pirate captains, and I don't play their game, then everyone will be happy with that solution. The bell rang to signal the end of free play. It was time to clean up for Circle and Snack, and Rosie and Lizzie never got to be pirate captains. So what do we do? Okay. So the only way to destabilize a constellation, right, a fixed point to which we all orient, and in this case, Jake and the Neverland Pirates is the constellation, the patriarchal constellation to which the kids are orienting, is to provide another source of light. Something that was done in this class was Vivian, Gus, and Paley's Dramatime stories. Is anybody in here familiar with that? Okay. Dramatime stories mean the children individually or in pairs dictate a story to the teacher, who then types it out, and then they act it out in front of their friends at circle time. So it's a very, very routinized but free way of telling stories. And within that, we find alternative iconographies. I decided that it would be kind of fun to look at creating an alternative book about pirates. And this was certainly stepping beyond my non-interventionist frame, but this exchange disturbed me because those girls never got to be pirate captains. And there was a lot of time spent exploring this boy's feelings about how they couldn't be pirate captains while the girls listened to some continuing gendered violence for upwards of 20 minutes. And there was nothing that could be done. So I thought, it would be nice to have a book or some competing media about girls and pirate captains, even if it's not my sort of liberal fantasy where there's lots of pictures of girls swashbuckling and slitting throats and being wild. I wanted just some other kind of narrative present. So I thought I would try with that. I do a lot of arts-based work. So we know that arts-based work with children in particular can emphasize children as agentive and their work as a vehicle for change, especially if you bind it up and make it look published, and then it seems really official to them. I think Prosser and Burke continue. Adult researchers are in the background and act as assistants to the children, and this repositions adults a little bit, so I felt better. And within that, we can look at Power's work on YPAR, which is one way of engaging youth in the social action, but I really wasn't sure how to frame that for preschool, and certainly how to use it to destabilize the pirate situation. So what I ultimately did was I drew on Gus and Paley and had the children individually and in pairs come and tell me stories about pirates. And I thought we would have a pirate book, and we would then have another text to compete with this really rigid, really dominant popular cultural text that was happening in the preschool. And again, this is about halfway there. I haven't really thought about it. And everybody drew pictures, and I apologize, the color isn't quite what it is here. This is a story from one child, and boys and girls both did this. Once upon a time, there was Rosie, Susan, and Ava. They were blue pirates. They played in a castle. Then they went to sleep. They had a good rest. They woke up when the sun was up. They played one more time. They ate eggs and watermelon. They planted roses in the garden. They painted. They went to school. They washed their hands and dried their hands. They played. They were captains, rather notably. And so we had this in the book, and they also acted this story out. Here's one. This is from a male student. Then there was a white bunny. And then there was another white bunny. And then there was a baby bulldog. And then there was a blue ninja turtle. And they went to fight some pirates on the pirate ship. Then they sailed on their ninja ship on the 7 seas. They got to an island and found a treasure. It was candy treasure. Then they went back home to eat the candy treasure. Then they went to sleep in their ninja home, and that was the end. Here's another one. Once upon a time, there was a unicorn. She ate ice cream, and then she turned into a pirate with princess hair and had so many toys. And then a person on a bicycle was waiting at the pirate's house, and they had ice cream and they carved a pumpkin. And then a mermaid came, and it said, "Why did you turn into a pirate?" The pirate didn't answer. It was very quiet. The end. And this is the last one. Once upon a time, there was a big butterfly, and then there was a big blue squished monster, and then there was a pretty pink dancing pony, and she was pink with some pink hair. And then there was a dress-up girl, and then they played with Play-Doh, and then they went to bed. And then they went to a toy store and they got all the toys, and then they wanted to play at the dancing pink pony's house, and so they had a play date and played with strawberries, and they tossed them in their mouth and ate the strawberries, and they were not interested in being pirates. Okay. So I got some stories, we acted them out, but I still don't feel like I really destabilized much. We did have a good time talking about pirates, and I felt like afterwards people could think about playing the pirate game a little bit differently. And rather notably in these narratives, not so much this one who was not interested in pirates, which was fine, is that we had pirates who were doing ordinary things. And that's really interesting to me, because the pirate narrative that was acted out in terms of Jake and the Neverland Pirates, where there could be no girl pirate captains, that the pirates, they were never doing ordinary things. And a touchstone of children's stories at this age is almost always you have fantasy characters, but they're doing ordinary things because that's within the realm of possibility for those children. So for example, you would get much more, let's say Spider-Man has a nap and goes to his friend's house. It's still Spider-Man and it's still exciting, but they're doing ordinary preschool things. In these stories, the pirates are doing things. They're eating eggs, they're eating strawberries, they're playing with the pink dancing pony, they're doing things that are within the realm of what children can imagine. And that's very different than the way that the pirate game typically happened, in the sense that they were never doing ordinary things. They were doing things that were dictated directly from the television script by Rory. So I wasn't sure what I did, and I'd kind of like to leave it there for some discussion about your reactions to the pirate incident and my attempts to destabilize it by making some other narratives that kind of didn't work. So I want to bring it to the group, because this is a brown bag, not a lecture, right? How many of you are uncomfortable listening to the pirate situation? Why? Somebody want to volunteer? Why were you uncomfortable listening to the pirate thing? Yes?
I feel like the boy's going to grow up and be a politician and use the same argumentation.
No girl pirate captains. Yeah. He wasn't listening to anyone. He was constantly justifying. And given that space to justify too, right? Somebody else. Beth, why were you uncomfortable with the pirates?
Because I have a vexed relationship with pirates. On the one hand, they're violent and mean, but on the other hand, they're a lot of fun. So how to work with kids through that is...
Right. For all the parents at this particular site who were up in arms about the presence of a Barbie doll at school, they had no problem with pirates. And I wanted to remind them that pirates are like ocean-going rapists and terrorists, so last time I checked. And yet this is okay. And it's animated, for our consumption by Disney. So and again, the color isn't quite right here, but these are white people. I mean, I think that they are a little bit racially ambiguous here, but these are white people. And it's very whitewashed and it's very homogenized. And yet nobody has a problem with that, because it's very masculine, right? But if I brought a Barbie to preschool, it would be like a feminist crime. Somebody else? Other reactions to the pirates? Yes?
I guess I'm curious what the conversation was between the teacher and the students after this incident. Like, was there explicit?
No.
Okay.
There was no conversation. And I hung out for a long time. Usually I leave after circle. I'm there in the morning for about 3 hours, and I usually leave after circle, but I hung out. And I didn't want to go up to the teacher and be like, "You handled that so badly," because she didn't. She was fine. But I wanted to hear more conversation, and I didn't want to just leave it. And this, again, is a tension for me between sort of the interpretive stance of, I'm just going to hang out and I'm going to see, and wanting to intervene and ultimately doing so. I wanted to hear more conversation about Rory and the pirates, and why didn't someone just say, you know what, you got to let them be pirate captains. It's the law, break it down, get used to it, right? But nobody said that. Whereas, and this is something I didn't present in this, and it's not connected to this material, is that other kids did a lot of girls had a lot of exclusionary behaviors, and when girls excluded boys or other girls from their games, the teachers brought down mob justice pretty quick. It's like, you're going to include them, and that's the way it is, and you can't say you can't play. But Rory was given 20 minutes of floor time to describe why, in 1,000 ways, the girls could not be pirate captains. They don't have the map. They're not a boy. They can't drive. It was interesting to me, and that wasn't deconstructed in any way. And I wanted to, to sit down and get some more information with Patty in particular and say, and I had her read over this transcript, and I said, well, you know, can you tell me more about what was going on here? I mean, transcript free of any annotation, because I didn't want her to feel like I was, you know, saying she was bad. And she said, yeah, you know, he's really rigid, and we need to work on that. And that's where she left it. Si Jung.
So it sounds really interesting, especially when it's linked to what your yesterday talk. So you're talking about the naughtiness as a resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So the pirate game is kind of a loud game, and
it's a very loud game.
Players there. So then, if naughtiness is linked to the resistance, and then the naughtiness kind of dominated by the boys, not the girls. So how can you kind of shape all these kind of?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I actually, as I was reading that vignette, I thought about the point I made yesterday, where I found that I watched the boys more than the girls because I was drawn to the noise. And if somebody's, you know, beating the tar out of each other in block area, you watch that. You don't watch people being very quiet and intimate in the corner, which is typically more of the female children who identified as female in the class. They would do things like they would sit, you know, they'd be over here, we'd be in the corner, and maybe I'd be grooming you. It was like monkeys, I swear. They would like groom each other's hair, wash and braid. And that was something that, and there were important things going on, important conversations and role play and nurturing play that was happening in those settings. But there was like a blood quest going on in the block area. And so I was drawn to that. And I had to really be very careful that I wasn't privileging those really loud activities because they drew my attention. And they were allowed to continue. You know, the teacher was very, as I said yesterday, she was very much into allowing those things to continue. I think the only reason that Patty ended up intervening was because it got so, I mean, it was obviously distress. I think if you look at naughtiness, you know, in terms of loud, destructive, or not even just, I don't say destructive, but loud, you know, disruptive activity, the pirate game definitely got loud. I mean, they'd be running around clubbing each other with pretend swords or blocks or whatever, or, you know, looking for gold or doubloons or sending people to the brig. And they would do those things. But this exchange was different because it was one of the few instances where I think we could have really disrupted some of the influence of that particular media script, which is not unique. And it's just it's parroting and mirroring the things that we see all the time. So I don't want to say the evil is in Disney. That's not true. But it didn't happen. Because instead it became about feelings and about massaging feelings and rigidity, and not about the fact that Rosie and Lizzie don't get to be pirate captains. And I mean, my instinct was, I was watching and I wanted to take Rosie and Lizzie aside and say, why don't you have your own pirate ship? Why don't you go, because you don't have to be in Rory's game, but Rory owns the game. And that's the way it was. And to be honest, I don't know that if I were Rosie and Lizzie, I would want to go be on the B squad ship. I want the ship. I want the official game. And that's Rory's game. Yes.
Did the game go on, like when you were in there, you know, a week later or the next?
The pirate game continued, and Rosie and Lizzie never played again.
Okay. Did any girls ever get to play?
No. And I think it's interesting. Rosie and I'm going to go back to the demographic slide. Okay. So Rosie and Lizzie are little, right? Rosie is 3. Okay, and she's one of these kids who's about yay tall. She's so tiny. Little tiny thing. And Lizzie is also very, very small. And Rory, Isaac, and Dante are all, I mean, Dante's a little bit younger than Lizzie, but they were all big kids, and all 3 of them were really verbally sophisticated, which is a real mark of power in preschool. If you're the one who can make the story and make it run and make it work, and you have all the big words, and you think fast and talk fast, that gives you power, right? So these girls were young, and that put them at a disadvantage. But Lizzie was able to advocate, and she was able to talk, and she was able to speak, and Rosie just kind of, you know, Rosie was little and doing her best. So I think that there was a little bit of an imbalance there. But there were also older girls. There was a girl in the class who was in her second year, Delia, and I talked about Delia yesterday in the gymnastics game, and anybody who heard about Delia knows that she is a force to be reckoned with. And Delia knew which side her bread was buttered on, and she never tried to play the pirate game because it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't something where she could have any degree of power or control, and she knew it. Yes.
Did Isaac or Dante have anything to say about the girls being?
They weren't there that day. This day was unique, and I don't think Lizzie and Rosie would have tried to enter the pirate game if all the boys were there. This was a day that Isaac was pulled out for some sort of testing of some kind, and Dante was out, I think, at a dental appointment, and couldn't be there. And so Rory needed somebody else to be the crew, but he was very clear. He only had to play as long as they were crew, and I love the crew captains thing. That's just, you know, because you can't be real, but I'll let you have this pretend thing. You can chair this committee of nothing, and then you can have administrative experience. So that was interesting. Something else that's I think important to note about the male players. I mentioned this early on, that there's this whole hierarchy of masculinity that happens in a lot of this media. So sometimes there's like the character of Cubby. Let me go back to that. There we go. There's Cubby, and he's definitely subaltern, right? He's even in the back, and he's very feminine, and he's round, and he doesn't wear the same fancy stuff as everybody else. There's no hat, there's no sword, he's not armed, you know, he's this subaltern thing. And then there's a third character, which is also male, but it's a parrot. I forget what its name is, it's something ridiculous. And Scully, that's what it is, Scully the pirate, the bird. And when it comes time to meeting out who has which role, Rory is always Jake. He's always this one here. Okay, and he offers the other two kids, the other two boys, Isaac and Dante, they can either be Cubby or Scully. And they fight to the death over who gets to be Scully. They would rather be an animal than be the subaltern male here. Okay, so they know, so they're very, very strategic about what they want to do. Right, and the boys also. This was interesting because Dante's very, very smart, and he almost always says, you know, I'll play, but I'll only play if I can be Scully, because I want to be the bird. I don't want to be this little chub here. I'm not interested in that. And then Isaac will say, well, I want to be, I'll be Izzy. And then Rory will say, no, you can't be Izzy because Izzy's a girl. And he said, well, why can't I be the girl? He said, well, you can be Cubby because Cubby's a boy. And they'll get really, teacher will have to intervene, and then they'll make a new male character for him. But it's so important for them not to be this character here. And I found that really, really interesting, as if they could read that status is somehow it's even lower than a female, which is saying something, right? Yes?
You mentioned in the beginning that you were thinking about this as YPAR. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I was thinking about my mini YPAR experiment, and I don't know that it's classical YPAR because it was just an attempt to step out of my role of standing there watching and not doing anything, of having them write this book about being pirates and explore what that meant and then enact those stories with the group. And I wasn't sure how much of that I really got. I think it was an adventure to tell these stories and to take everybody out of the room and talk to them, okay, we're going to tell a different pirate story. Can you tell a pirate story? But the pirate stories were all stuff like this. And everybody was so excited when it came time to do circle and to act out these stories. So for example, if we were going to read this story, I would choose one person to be Rosie, one person to be Susie, one person to be Ava, and then they'd act it out. And I thought that would give it a little bit of street cred, right? But at the end of the day, it couldn't compete with the media script. Right, so I tried my best, but it didn't work. So it was an adventure, it was an attempt. And the book is still there in preschool. It's, you know, we cut out the laminated board and made an actual book with all the pirate stories about who's the pirate and their illustrations, which I think are just fantastic. But it's a text, but it can't compete because it's not the official text, right? There's a wonderful paper that's coming out in the next, I think the fall issue of Anthropology and Education Quarterly, and which is the journal I edit. And it's a woman whose a name I cannot remember, but she's at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and it's all about popular culture in preschool. It's called She Doesn't Know I Got It, You Ain't Gonna Tell Her, Are You? That's the name of the paper. And it's all about how kids bring pop culture into preschool classrooms and how the teachers, like if you bought a Barbie doll, the teacher would freak out because you can't have that here, it's not allowed here. And which kinds of popular cultural texts get to come into the classroom. And I can see why the children use those things as a way to represent their experience and bring those into this context. But on the other hand, if there wasn't a book about Jake and the Neverland Pirates, maybe my little experience with participatory action of exploring what pirates mean with kids and doing something different and what gendered play means with kids, even in this clumsy, half-hearted way, maybe would stand a little bit taller and stronger if there weren't quite so many competing official texts that were present in the classroom. Yes?
Are there children's books out there that have female?
You know, there are. There's the Ballad of the Pirate Queens, which I think a lot of people have seen, but kids know what that is. They know this came from like the back shelf of the Feminist Bookstore. They get it, you know. Lizzie's parents have a million books about girl pirates, and they're all from like, you know, Cleus Press, you know, things like that, right? Yeah. So the kids know which ones are realer, you know, they know. 'Cause I mean, the thing that's been on television that's been animated is not from Cleus Press, right? It's the official, and it resonates with that. We go back to that place where we know that kids know that the show with the white male protagonist is for everybody, and the show with the female protagonist is just for girls, and the show with this children of color is some other other market, right? Boutique market. So they know. And what were you going to say?
I just wonder if there was a book out there that would be an interesting read aloud for the kids that you did before they came and told you their stories as some kind of...
I thought about doing that and I didn't, because the book I had, which Lizzie actually had the same one, was The Ballad of the Pirate Queens, and it was all about like pregnancy and execution, and I thought, I just don't know about that. So I decided to leave it, but I don't know if that would have been better or not. See, this is all part of the learning and trying to figure out, like, was I really doing anything by totally saying, okay, we're gonna write our own pirate book, knowing that it can never stack up. I mean, maybe they would have been totally jazzed to hear that story, but in the end, Rory owns the game. And nothing I did here, YPAR or not YPAR, can ever undo that Rory owns the game. The girls own some games. They own the kitty game, right? The family game. But do you want to play the kitty family game, or do you want to play the pirate game? They know what the high status game is. Stephanie.
About the sense they were making of Rory's statement that girls can't be pirate captains. I mean, in the story you're sort of talking about how they're like, no, I do, I want to be the captain.
Yeah, I want to be the captain, yeah.
That's still a very like, well, I want to be the captain, as opposed to like, you can't say girls can't be pirate captains.
That never, and I kept waiting for Patty to say, no, you can't say that they cannot be this thing, and she never did. She never said it. And when I took Rosie in particular, and I think this is Rosie here. Yeah, this is Rosie. And I wish you could see the color, because it's this wonderful rainbow insect. When I took Rosie to talk about pirates, I said, do you remember when we had the conversation about pirates? And she said, yes. And I said, I want us to write our own story about pirates where anybody can be the pirate captain. And she's not interested. That door is closed. And I'm not sure why. I think if and I wasn't in a position in the classroom where I felt like I could do that, but I think if a teacher had struck while the iron was hot, and said to Rory, you don't get to be in charge of who can be a pirate captain, and get out the little tiny hourglass that we all have seen in early childhood, and at the end of the hourglass, somebody else gets a turn being captain. I think that would have gone a lot further than this long discussion of feelings or my attempt to write an alternative narrative with children. Right. I saw another hand, yes.
Yeah, so I'm sure during the course of this ethnography, you've seen a lot of things.
There's so much. I've seen so many things.
Throw as a representations of male supremacy, white supremacy. What inspired this particular intervention? Was it just that you wanted?
I was so tired of hearing it. I had watched a lot of things happen. This incident, the pirate incident, as it shall henceforth be known, the pirate situation, was one of the most concentrated examples, I thought, of a child basically excluding other children from a game, and being told that that was fine, and let's talk about your feelings about how do you feel about excluding other people. How do you feel about being a sexist? It was one of those moments in research where I happened to catch it, and it was so crystallized that the more I thought about it, the more I thought, we really need another narrative. And I could bring in The Ballad of the Pirate Queens, or I could bring in this other book from the back of the Feminist Bookstore about the girl pirate, but I thought it would be stronger and better if we had narratives from the kids, but it didn't really work out that way. But I've seen a lot of things, but this was one of those moments, and I think anybody who's done field work knows those moments where the children really, it's this conversation that really comes to a head. Miriam.
Sally, how does one read this? Is this a case of gender being constructed in childhood, or is this a case of children being made consumers?
I think it's a lot of what they're consuming, and for children, it's they're working it out in their play and reproducing that. And he's not so much all about what girls can't do and what he's not saying. I don't think Rory is a deep-hearted sexist where he's excluding the girls, but he knows that this is Jake. There's no girl pirate captain. Izzy's the crew.
And if we go back to the classroom today, when we're all sort of consuming Frozen, would the roles be different, and would kids be mouthing?
And Frozen is interesting because Frozen hit later that year, and everybody let it go. I can sing it in my sleep. I heard it all the time, but it was uninteresting to the male students. It was another boutique thing because it was girls. and it was uninteresting. And the girls would come dressed in the whole thing, and they would be singing Let It Go and flinging off their clothes, and everybody was really interested in that. All the girls were interested in that, but the boys were not interested in that kind of power, and they were back with this. And then the other thing that they kind of adopted at the same time as Frozen was the Ninjago. It's something with Legos and I don't understand, and ninjas and like the killing and monsters with horns, and they had all kinds of fun with that. But it was like railroad tracks going in two different directions by the end of the year. The feminine play and the masculine play, associated with boys and girls. And there was actually an interesting moment with the Ninjago thing, because they were saying that Rory was saying there are only boys in Ninjago. There are no girl Ninjago creatures. And this other little boy, who doesn't usually talk very much, he has a hearing loss and he has a hard time talking, he said, no, this one is a girl. This one right here. And Rory said, no, it's a boy. They're all boys. They're all boys. They're all boy Ninjago. He said, no, it's a girl. He said, look, the eyes are purple with eyelashes. That's how you know. And Rory looked and said, you know what? You're right. It is a girl Ninjago. Let's not be that one. And it was this funny moment of reading gender for them with the Ninjago stuff. But yeah, it was. I think that there's an element of sort of the wake of consumerism happening here, and those scripts and how play works out. And that may be one of the reasons why we know that media has such an impact, because it's then absorbed and acted out and played in these ways. And Isaac was interesting, because Isaac had no idea what was, and I'll go back to here's my players. Isaac was the one whose parents wouldn't let him have television, and he was totally lost. He'd come in wearing his like Garanimals, and he had no idea. But he was very, poor Isaac. It's be a long road for Isaac. But Isaac was totally taken with it. And he knew that he did not want to be Cubby. Remember, he's the one who would rather be the girl than be Cubby, than be the subaltern male. And he figured it out right away. He knew exactly what the game was. And his parents were just aghast. They bought him dolls, his backpack was pink. I mean, they did everything they possibly could. And that was the way it was. So. And it was interesting because Dante is, and I could talk forever about these boys, but Dante had these parents who were really, really, they were activists, they were really feminist-oriented family, and really located in a really, really rich, vibrant African-American community, and they had relocated to the area where the school was, and very enriched in black womanism in particular. And Dante had every kind of sword and gun and all those kinds of toys that Isaac's parents would have just freaked out in their middle-class white whatever. But he was the one who was most invested in making sure that girls were included. And there were so many instances where he would find ways to include a girl in a game by making a new role for her. Not the pirate game. Pirate game is real rigid, but he would make a new role for a girl and bring a girl in. Because for him, it was just what you did. And it was really interesting. And like I said, there's a paper on Dante eventually, because he was interesting. And Rory would kind of wouldn't police him and would let him do that. Other questions? Yes.
How long did you collect the stories for, and then?
Oh, for the little book.
Yeah, and then what was your process of doing that? Because I have a hunch that kids tell stories in lots of different ways. And
well, these kids have done a lot of Dramatime stories, and so I wanted to do something that they were familiar with, so I didn't get any noise on that. So typically when they did Dramatime stories, the teacher would sit down with her laptop and say, who wants to tell a Dramatime story? And then there'd be a list of who was interested. And they could do it single or in pairs or in threes, but they typically did it by themselves. And so what I did was I did it the exact same way so that they were familiar. And the children come over and I say, okay, we're going to be telling stories. And she doesn't give them a topic, but I did. I said, I know there's a pirate game in the classroom and that people play it a certain way. And I'm interested in hearing about pirates and telling stories about pirates that you might know. Can you tell me a story about a pirate? And then they dictated the story to me. And I read it back to them, and they made any corrections, and I typed it, because if you type it, it makes it real for them. If it appears in font like this, then it's real. So I typed it for them, and then we'd go to Circle that day, which is meeting time. Everybody knows the meeting time song, right? Meeting time, and we would act it out. So, for example, we'd go to the story. I would choose people. I would say, these are the roles. In this story, we have Rosie, Susan, and Ava. Is there anybody else? No, it's just these three people. And then the author I don't remember who the author was, but let's say the author was Rosie. She would come up and she would choose characters. I'd say, Rosie, who do you want to be in this story? And Rosie would say, well, I'm going to be Rosie. Okay, so can you choose someone to be Susan? Who wants to be Susan? And people raise their hand. I want you to be Susan. They come up. I want you to be Ava. They come up. And then I read the story and they act it out. And if they have any changes they want to make to the story after they act it out, I note those changes. Then we went back and we printed them all out and they drew pictures and we kind of put the book together from that. So everybody had a chance to act out and comment on the stories. That was the process that we used. And it was something that they did a lot with Dramatime stories, but it was focused. And they didn't, the stories, no matter what I tried to do in terms of making alternative pirate narrative, they're not about pirates, right? They're not. Nobody's the pirate cap. Well, they were captains. This one must have actually been Rosie or Lizzie because they were captains, comes up in the end. But I think this, and I can extrapolate, analyze beyond what's normal with this, but I think this was to please me. Because I think that they knew that I wanted them to be feminist and be pirate captains. Go ahead.
The follow-up to it, with the structured drama time that the teacher has, are there rules to it? Like what can be said and what cannot be said?
There are no rules.
During the story?
There are no rules. And so we have, inevitably not in my little pirate, I think that actually is a pirate, but I don't know what they're doing. I think that there have been a lot of stories that are kind of pushing it in terms of how many stories you can have about poop before you're tired of hearing about it. But nothing's off limits. And there's a wonderful, if you're interested in Dramatime stories, Vivian Gusson-Paley has all these wonderful little volumes that she's done. And the one that sticks with me when people ask me the question about what's an okay story in Dramatime is there's a story about a little boy who tells a story about September 11th, right like a month after it happened. I don't know if people have read that story. And the teacher was sweating when she was taking down the narrative because he was going to act it out in front of all the kids. And she's like, oh my God, these kids are 3 and 4. How are we going to talk about 2,000 people dying in fiery conflagration? And she said it was the most beautiful thing. And I wish I had a copy that I could read to you because it's so poetic about this little boy and how he was making sense of the story. And he's doing almost ballet. He's being the plane, and then the people curl up and die, and everybody's on the floor sleeping, and that's it. And of course, the teachers were bawling by the time it was over. For the kids, it was just another story. So nothing is off limits in Dramatime. But that said, it's endless stories about the pink dancing. Where's the pony girl? This one showed up over and over again. The dress-up girl and the pink pony, the dancing pink pony. I mean, stuff like that is usually what you get. And there's definitely a trend. Go ahead.
I wonder if that was part of what happened is that they have, like the norms for Dramatime are they get to tell whatever their story they want. So you impose this new thing that you told them had to be about a pirate. They told whatever story they want, and they just threw the pirate in.
And maybe that's why it didn't work.
Yeah. I wonder if also maybe videotaping the acting out makes it even more authentic.
Maybe. I have a deep aversion to technology, so I think that I need to get over that and get I have my little iPad, and I could have made a movie about it. These kids did a lot of plays and videotaped things and made television programs and did things like that, and wrote a lot of books and stories. And maybe they just didn't want to take my direction, That said, there were times in the last, not with this group, that group, but the new group that came in the next year that got out the pirate book. And they read it and they enjoyed it and looked at these pictures about the ninja pirates and the 7 seas and all that kind of stuff. And so I don't know. It's definitely, it can't compete though. It can't compete, but it was there along with all the feminist books from Leah's Press that nobody touches. I saw another hand. Leslie.
To pick up on that, how would we know if it worked?
How would we know if it worked? Right.
YPAR is that it's unpredictable.
And it just does
and the participants take it in multiple directions, and we don't know how long that will, whether it's transitory or whether it creates a shift. So what does it mean that it did or didn't work?
I think that's a really good question, because maybe it's a process, and I'm so focused on the product being what I wanted. Maybe just having a chance to talk about it, even if it turns into the pink pony, is working. I don't know.
We could think that changing the pirate into a pink pony is...
Yeah, I like that a lot. Right?
That's one possibility, right?
I like that.
Or the girl who says, at the end, one of the authors, I don't want to be a pirate.
They were not interested.
They were not interested. And it might be more fun to be a blue monster.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, because this is all new to me, and it's not something that I've, you know, done a lot with. And so for me, even sort of dissolving the fourth wall and stepping in and saying, I'm going to do this crazy and weird. But yeah, maybe that's what they did. You know, Rory's story was, I could have taken it right out of the television program. You know, this is what Jake and the Vampires do, and they're all boys. Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Just one last question. Did he tell a story?
He did. They all did. Everybody did.
And was it pretty scripted?
And it was exactly what the narrative was. First they do this, then they do this, then Captain Hook comes, then they win, then they get doubloons. I'm like, great. Nice original work, Rory. But that's his thing, right? Or what do they, and I'm not, you know, development isn't my area, but like repetitive play. He's trying to make sense. There's something very, very attractive for him in this narrative, something very, very attractive. How many of you remember when you were kids? And I don't like to do the when we were kids thing because that's not useful, but the story that drew you, and you worked on it, right? When I was a little girl, I was born in Japan, and I spent a lot of my youth there, and the story of Momotaro. I was obsessed with Momotaro, with the Peach Boy. And I had a little book, it was in Japanese with the pictures on it, and that was the story I worked on. It was in my play and in my pictures, and I obsessed over it. So everybody's got their thing. Yes, ma'am.
I'm having a little bit of trouble thinking of this as YPAR, and I was wondering.
Yeah.
Were the children the ones that identified the problem? Were they?
And that's a problem because they're supposed to identify their own problem, except Rosie and Lizzie, who identified the problem in as much a way as they could, right? Yeah. So it's not really.
Like, were they the ones that proposed doing a book, and then also did they see themselves as experts in something? So for me, I'm just wondering if you could speak more about what you think are the elements of YPAR.
I think it's borderline, and I call it mini YPAR because it's so very distinct and distilled, and it was just my initial foray out of the purely observational stance. I think that they were very used to writing books and writing stories, and when I took Rosie and Lizzie aside, I did say, do you remember this? Let's talk about pirates. Here's a chance for you to tell a story about pirates, and then we got the pink pony. So I think that there were elements of it that are not classical. It's not classical YPAR at all. I mean, we're not solving a major social problem. We're doing purely a narrative work or writing a story. So you're right, it's definitely not, but it's sort of a initial foray. And I don't know that I would do it again, because I don't know that I was comfortable changing my modus operandi, you know? I don't know that I would, but the book is still there. We spent a lot of time talking about it. Everybody enjoyed acting it out. And funny, when they acted out the stories, things were a lot more piratey than they are in the text. So maybe the videotaping would have been good.
Do you think that them writing the book would be kind of what it would look like for young children to be researchers? Because I'm thinking of also an element of YPAR is that the
research, yeah.
that the participants are researchers in the project.
We had some books in the classroom. We didn't have any of the books that were as equitable as I would have liked. We did have some books, and they did read some books about pirates, and they did look at a few, but it was very, very minor. It was an afternoon activity. So yeah, there could have been. If I wanted to really do something where we were looking at gender, we could definitely make it into a big instructional moment. But I think also if I was really going to do this the right way and have it really truly YPAR, I would need a lot more space than what I had. So yeah, so it is definitely mini. But for the kids, a few of them mentioned that and this was very casual, they just mentioned that they liked having a topic. They liked being able to tell a story about a topic. They liked that I made, because with the Dramatime stories, you never do anything. It never becomes a book. They liked that I made it into a book, and that we drew pictures together, and they chose the best picture to go with their story. And they liked that authoring piece, but it wasn't truly research in the sense of what you might do with older children, or even with younger children, because they can absolutely do that too. So yeah, it's a little thrust. I see a hand in the back.
Was the use of Dramatime isolated to Dramatime itself? Was it specifically, all right, for this 45 minutes to 2 hours, we're going to be doing Dramatime?
Dramatime happened every day.
Right, but was it isolated only to Dramatime? What they did and how they expressed themselves?
Dramatime stories were discrete in the sense that they were told during free play. Children would be doing, for example, you'd all be doing free play, and then anybody who wanted would come over and tell a Dramatime story, and it would be recorded in the computer. Then at Circle, we would act them out. So it happened at those times. It wasn't something that happened at any other time. But there was a huge amount of free play happening in the classroom. But that was unstructured. And eventually, there's so much data, and I need another sabbatical to really go through it all. I think it'd be interesting to look at the kinds of play that's happening in free play, which is where the pirate incident happened, versus what shows up in Dramatime, which is much more official, and it's a very different kind of play. You know, and to see how that shakes out. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was very regimented.
So, could you say then that in a more longitudinal view, if it was used more regularly and less officially, you could then empower the kids within the utilitarian aspect of the story time into other aspects of their play and projects?
You know, I think that what children did with Dramatime was they used it in a way that wasn't really content bound, and that's one reason why this didn't work as a YPAR, because it was not about content. The Dramatime was about being able to tell your story and have it read by an adult, but also being able to choose who you play with. So for example, if I don't ever get to play with Juan in free play because she doesn't want to play with me, I can write a Dramatime story and then I can pick her to be in my story and she has to act it out with me. And nobody turns down Dramatime, nobody, because it's a fun thing to do, right? So for kids, that was what the location of power was primarily. And it was every single day there was drama, unless there was, you know, a special assembly or something, then they always had time for Dramatime. But it was a chance to play with people you don't normally play with. The pirate stories, I'm trying to think, and I didn't actually record this, but I'm thinking that Rory didn't participate in any of the girls' pirate plays. So, you know, if I said who wants to be the dress-up girl, Rory didn't participate in the girls' pirate stories. He just did his and I think Dante's, because it was much more canonical. Maybe about 2 minutes. One more last juicy question about pirates. Miriam.
I just wanted to say that, you know, our ideas about what constitutes participatory methodologies are also really particular and sort of socially constructed, because when I tried to do similar work with slightly older students in school in India and tried to get them to draw and sort of make up stories, I know that what works is also sort of weird, but I mean, it really didn't work. The kids were not interested. The kids were bewildered. And the imagery that they were familiar with and the imagery that we sort of expect when I asked them to draw maps, because that's the other sort of childhood geographers' methods of getting children to talk about spaces, and the maps did not work. What ended up working was weirdly when I asked them to critique movies with me.
Isn't that interesting? So interesting.
Or make political speeches, which was a mode of engagement they were familiar with in their context.
And yesterday, Beth and I were talking, and I was saying that I was, you know, I had these images and these little stories, and, you know, visual data is something I struggle with. And she pointed out, and I agree, that I really privilege drawing as a modality because I'm an artist. And it did not occur to me that a child would not want to draw. And there are non-drawers. And even though we told the story in creating the visual artifact, it was really heavy on the drawing, right? So there, I mean, in retrospect, there's all kinds of problems. But, and it's interesting, but and it's funny when things don't work, because I think that's also data. And I think that's a lesson I learned in my dissertation, is a lot of stuff doesn't work and it's still data. It makes a whole that's really interesting. And I wonder if going back, what I would do differently, or how I would do differently, or what my, you know, how focused I would be in my goal, and what I really wanted to know, and how I would know if it worked, what that really means. Because I like what Leslie said about maybe turning the pirate into a pink pony is the best thing I could have ever hoped for. You know, I like that. I like that a lot, right? So I agree. It's unexpected what's going to work and what modalities children are familiar with, and the primacy that we place on books and texts and stories may not be as important in their lives as a political speech.
Probably a good place to end.
All right, I saw somebody yawning, so I know it's time. Thank you very much.